seen 2 vlogs about a discussion between Jeff Sutherland and Henk de Velde, who both risked their lives. One in airplanes, the other on a boat sailing the world solo. At the end of the interview, they talked about how to wake people up to be continuous learners. And that part of the interview I would like to share with you as well. So, here it comes, the third and final part of the interview between Jeff Sutherland and Henk de Velde. Enjoy.
Well, what I notice in the business where we're in is that people think they are smart enough up front. So they're in an environment in which, let's say, stuff changes.
Yeah.
Anything changes, but still they think they're smart enough up front and they don't need to learn on the way. They can just think and design everything and then everything goes as planned. Where does this come from? I mean, if I listen to Henk, if I listen to you, Jeff, you are all focused on learning on the way and, finding out what happens. But how does it come that, let's say, in the business that we are in, people have completely lost this?
I think, you know, my immediate reaction to that is that these people have not encountered reality. They're somehow separated from reality, so they presume in their head that things are some way and reality is totally different, and they're surprised when they get whacked at the side of the head. And the amazing thing about it in software is that they go ahead and assuming that reality is that way again, even though the project has failed, you know, it's $200 million over budget, it's 2 years late, and they go and plan the same project ahead. So these people are like out of connection with reality. So one of the things that could really help them would be go on a trip around the world with Henk.
Yes.
And confront death on a regular basis. And then maybe they would wake up.
Yes.
That's what my feeling is.
Those people live on false security.
Yes.
Yes. How it comes? Well, part of our society.
Yeah, well,
I mean, you can go back. I mean, this is kind of a deep philosophical thing. I mean, why do men go to war?
Yep. Yep.
Because they're living in a false security, and it's only when they have a direct confrontation with life and death that they feel like they're alive, and they taste it and they want to feel it again. You know, one of the best things I ever learned, and I learned it from studying robotics, is that in order to make the robots work, they try to make them work like humans. But every time they get the robot to work, half of what they program into the robot is wrong.
Yes.
So they have to train the robot to assume that half of what they think is wrong. And I realized that when they tried to program the robots like people, they didn't work. That's why the people don't work. They assume they know when every day half of what you think is wrong. And your job is to figure out which thing you're thinking is wrong today. That's the job. And the fascinating thing, if you read Taiichi Ohno's work, Taiichi Ohno invented the Toyota production system. In his talks to project leaders, which are recorded in one of his books, he said, you have to understand as a project leader that half of what you think is wrong. And if you don't admit that to the people, they won't follow you. Because when you're implementing something that's risky, they will not trust a person that assumes they're right in the face of what is obviously wrong. So the first thing a project leader needs to know or learn is to assume half of what they think is wrong. Then people will follow you. Then he said, the next step is to realize that half of what the team thinks is right. And you've got to be looking for that every day, and when you find it, you tell them how great they are. Then they will follow you anywhere. And that's the secret to leadership, to projects, to whatever. And so this mindset that you've just described is a completely dysfunctional mindset. That's why we have so many problems in the world. Why we have so many projects that fail. You release your chains and take responsibility for building a life of beauty, of wonder, that we can only imagine at this time. We can only imagine. But I know it's possible if people will participate and try to learn, try to do. It's just like in Scrum. You can deliver 10 times as fast. You can have so much fun while you're doing it. You can be exhilarated. If you do that, it will change your life. You will never be the same at the end. Every single person has that opportunity. And so in my little corner, Scrum is the way they can flip into that.
Jeff, in all our history, many of the old spiritual leaders have said already, wake up.
Right.
Wake up. Why aren't we awake?
Because we love the feeling of
Self.
full security.
False security. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's it. That's it.
How do you establish a learning attitude? Well, if you listen to Jeff and Henk, the main solution is to sit with Henk in a boat, risk your life and face death now and then. Well, I think that's a bit extreme. But I think there are other ways to deal with that. When I did my PhD, I looked into learning theory, and I've learned that children and adults learn completely different. Children, they look at others and they copy. Adults, they look at what they already know and they seek for confirmation. So confirmation of what they think is true, then they feel pleased. And it all comes back to this false sense of security. We like to feel secure. We as adults, we just dislike being wrong. But the research on the opposite says something completely different. It says we're wrong most half of the time. And I think that's the big takeaway of the talk between Jeff and Henk. When you really want to be successful, admit that you yourself are wrong half of the time, but that the people you work with are right half of the time, and compliment them for that. That's the way to be successful, and that's the way to establish long life learning.
This videoblog is sponsored by Awareness.